Hey everyone, my guest today is David Gordon. David is the managing editor at TheaterMania and the president of the Outer Critics Circle, which is the official organization of writers on the New York theater for out-of-town newspapers, national publications, and other media beyond Broadway. Earlier in his career, David was a reviewer for NewYorkTheater.com, and before that, he was a freelance reporter and began as a news and entertainment editor at his university paper, the Hofstra Chronicle. David Gordon.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so happy. I get to see you occasionally in the audience of different Broadway shows.
Across a crowded room.
Exactly. Sometimes masked. And recently I finally got to meet your incredibly impressive wife. And
She's way cooler than I am.
she is, well, your love story plays out on Twitter and other places that you post, and it is really beautiful to watch you raise your beautiful young daughter, and just how much the two of you support each other. So, how beautiful to kind of be able to celebrate love and the things you love together. I had the honor of being on your, I guess it wasn't a podcast, I guess it was for TheaterMania. During COVID, you were doing a lot of interviews on Zoom and sort of were one of the first people to adapt to that way of interviewing people. But I want to talk about the reason this time I brought you on, because you tweeted a couple of weeks ago this announcement on Twitter, and I would love for us to deep dive into it because it's a very exciting announcement. So
Yes, please.
I will read your words. I hope I have printed them correctly, but what I saw was you posted, "This season, we will begin presenting acting awards without gender specifications. We will honor lead performers and featured performers in plays and musicals for Broadway and off-Broadway in separate categories." And this was you tweeting as the president of the Outer Critics Circle.
Yes. And that is all true. It is very exciting. It is scary from an administrative perspective because it will require a lot of work to make sure that certain things don't happen, but the benefits outweigh the cons, and it's the time to do this, and the time is right, and we just felt it was the next natural step for our 73-year-old organization.
Which I would love if you could just take a minute, and before we deep dive into what it really looks like, if one were to go to the award ceremony and sort of all that goes into it, and then before that, the nominations and what that's going to look like. For the people who don't know, I mean, I read a description of the Outer Critics Circle, but can you talk a little bit more about the organization and what it means in the industry itself?
Yeah, so primarily the Outer Critics Circle awards are one of the precursors to the Tony Awards. It's always, the Outer Critics Circle Awards, the Drama Desk Awards, and the Tonys. It was founded in 1950 by a group of theater journalists who worked for publications that weren't the first string New York publications. They were critics for out-of-town newspapers back when newspapers regularly covered the theater scene, which does not happen anymore. And it was a group of people who basically just wanted to get together and start talking about the theater they had seen and wanted some sort of social aspect around theater going. And because the New York Drama Critics Circle, which also existed at the time, was and has stringent rules about, they are the New York Drama Critics Circle. They only allow in New York publications. This group of writers, led by a critic named John Gassner, and others, founded this organization just as a way to be able to talk about the shows they've seen and award great productions on a yearly basis. And that's basically the founding, and it's sort of continued on that way up until recently, when we've started bringing in podcasts and websites and all of that, because, as I said, newspapers are doing away with their theater critics on a daily basis now, pretty much. And we've had to adapt, and that's why they brought me on as president. I joined the board about 10 years ago. I became president, I think 6 years ago now. And I'm basically tasked with figuring out a way that this organization that is known to be older and a little kooky and all of those things can really figure out a way to adapt into the modern theatrical world.
Well, I have to say, when I was doing an off-Broadway play, My Name is Asher Lev, and it won the Outer Critics Circle
Yeah.
Award. It's an incredible event, and it is, it's funny that it's under the radar in a way. I mean, it's not within the community, but I mean, it's really one of the most glorious, star-studded, warm award ceremonies, and I feel like
Well,
an incredibly personal one as well.
people really love our parties, and for the people listening to this, our parties used to be, and it hasn't because of the pandemic anymore. Well, back in the 80s and 90s, it used to be like an 11:30 p.m. cocktail party at Sardi's where everybody would get drunk, and after their shows on, Memorial Day weekend, and they'd come after the curtain came down, and it was glamorous, and you've got that old school world of Broadway that you think about. And then it became a mid-afternoon cocktail party on a Thursday afternoon. And last year we did more of a traditional ceremony because of COVID, and we didn't want to seat people at a restaurant. And we're continuing that way this year because I really like the format of the more ceremonial sort of thing where you get up on a podium and you speak,
And there's an audience.
and there's an audience. And it was really quite moving in 2022 because it really was the first awards thing since the pandemic. And people, all of our recipients last year were really touched and moved because everybody had the tenor of, well, we really didn't know if we'd ever get to do this again, this being act and live performance.
Yeah,
So it,
yeah.
it was a very moving afternoon, and no, people really do like our ceremony.
I know that the Thursday night was a tipsy performance
Yeah.
back in the day when it was a luncheon. Um, so tell me about this decision. What does it really mean? I mean, as much as you can talk about, there hasn't been a lot about the details as much as just a general announcement.
Yeah, and we're still
Anything
sort
that
of,
you can share would be fabulous.
well, it's so interesting. We're still sort of figuring it out. And like I said, there are so many variables to it. But backing up, I've been talking about this for a while. I've seen the value in this for a while. Because we are getting to a point now where, gender is a construct, gender is a spectrum. And my philosophy is, and especially now that I have a kid, I think about like, what is it like, when she's going to come to me with some of these announcements about who she is or who, down the line. I say she now, but obviously who knows, we are open to it. And my overall philosophy on this has always been, it's not for me to categorize you. It's your life. You'll tell me how you want to be looked at, thought of, and I have to respect that. And we all should be respecting that. And over the pandemic, I noticed, the question of gender non-binary and trans issues and all of that really came into my mind and really came into the fore of my brain during the pandemic because I started to pay more attention to it. That's not to say I didn't before, but it became a lot more apparent to me that this is where the world is going. This is the way things are shifting. Things are not as black and white as I thought they once were, as the world thought they once were. You know, people are being attacked for who they are, with trans issues and all of that. And for us to really say we represent the full spectrum of the theater scene, we have to honor people for who they see themselves as, not who we say they are.
Listen, there was just an announcement by an actor who's a performer in & Juliet, a Broadway
Right.
musical, who announced before nominations have been revealed for the Tonys,
Right.
we're not up to that yet for Tony season 2023, that they are bowing out of even being considered because the categories don't reflect their perception of who they are and how they travel in the world. So,
And I cannot fathom going up to anyone and saying, okay, you're in a show this year, pick which category you want. Like, are you male or
right.
female? You know, because I know for a lot of people, sometimes it changes day by day, sometimes it changes hour by hour. You know, it's how a person views themselves. And it's like I said, it's not for me to say, okay, pick from these two things that you don't feel you are.
So if we're not, it's so funny that you talk about your own child and there's a crossing guard in my neighborhood that I'm really close to, who I love, who has watched my kids grow up, and we're still in touch, even though they're not at that elementary school anymore. I pass her every day, and she's lived in this neighborhood in Brooklyn her entire life, and she's probably in her 60s now, and of a certain generation and a certain sort of political viewpoint. And she told me a story yesterday of this young couple that were walking down the street, and they had their baby. When I had a baby, it was called Bjorn. I don't know what the baby carrier is called anymore. And she was like, oh my God, that's such a beautiful baby. What is it? And the couple said, we don't know yet. So she meant, what is it, boy or girl? Right. And the couple already, with their, 1 month old baby in their Bjorn, are not even giving it a he or a she. They are starting with they, I guess, and really waiting for the baby to reveal to them who the baby is. And so I think,
we have not done that, for the record. We are
well, you said our daughter or she, and unless she changes her way of gendering herself or the pronoun she uses, you will follow suit, as opposed to a world in which people are even beginning on day one with not assigning a gender, and really waiting for the reveal. So when we say,
and that's a reflection of the world, and that was the sort of thing that I was trying to get across to my board of directors who are making up, because this is not a unilateral decision for me. This is we are 9 people. It is, I am the youngest by 30 years at least on my board, and there are people who see the value in what I'm talking about. There are people who disagree with it vehemently. There are, and that's
and everywhere in between.
Right. And as I like to say, that's the ball game. That's why we all come together to do this, because what we want to do in the end is honor the theater scene as best we can. And my whole thing was, this is the way of the future, and this is how it has to be going forward. And we can't do things the way they've always been done just because that's the way they've always been done.
So can we use that show just as an example, since that became newsworthy, that Anne Juliet has a performer that doesn't want to be involved in the process, basically. So if you were to I don't know, in terms of outer critic circle, how many of you there are, if everyone has to have seen the show in order to vote, sort of what all the kind of nuts and bolts behind the scenes are. But let's use that show as an example, or really any show that you want, where there are many leads, many supporting roles.
So it started out as, so the way it was before this year. We would have best leading actor in a musical, best leading actress in a musical, best featured actor in a musical, best featured actress in a musical. And that goes for plays, and we would combine Broadway and off Broadway. So everybody would be lumped together. And, the thing is in an awards like this, where you're lumping together Broadway and off Broadway, no, not everybody is going to see everything. No, we can't really penalize our voters from voting in a category because they haven't seen a random show that maybe have gotten nominated. We just ask people be as, honest and stringent as possible, and, vote for what they enjoyed the most, like vote for the thing that they want to see awarded. And, we try to do it fair, but in an award setting, even looking at the Oscars, the Emmys or whatever, you can only be fair up to, not fair, but, you can only be so controlling up to a point. Like, you're never going to be, no one is ever, I guess what I'm trying to say is no one is ever going to see everything. And you can't penalize people, like the Tonys this year. You can't penalize people if they missed one show in a category.
Right. You just hope that they vote on the things they did see.
Right.
Rather than a word of mouth nomination.
And that they're honest about it. And honesty is the policy that I'm trying to adhere to the most. So this year, one of the things we realized when we removed gender from the categories is that the categories, the selections would be a lot larger because you're doing, essentially you're combining the 20 people in Best Actor in a musical on Broadway and Best Actress in a musical on Broadway into one category. That would automatically disenfranchise off-Broadway actors too, because those are the shows, the smaller shows, the shows that tend to be forgotten in general. So that's why we decided to create off-Broadway categories too. So that way, even though, we're combining a bunch of categories, we're allowing off-Broadway to come through and shine more because we realize that those two are people that would tend to be forgotten because they're smaller, they're not on the radar, not everybody saw them, and we want to recognize as many people as we can.
Wait,
One
so
of
are you saying, just to be clear, that rather than all theater, you'll have Broadway categories and off-Broadway categories, which you did not have before?
Yes, so
It
we'll
was
have
best of all theater in New York, not, okay.
Yeah, so we'll have best leading performer in a musical on Broadway, best leading performer in a musical off Broadway,
Right.
featured musical, blah, 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 plays too. So we are actually keeping this, we actually have the same number of categories that we have had in the past, even though we are removing essentially 8 categories. The math never works out in my head.
Right. Well, we're in the theater. We don't have to worry about
exactly.
that. The thing is, as you say it, it just seems really simple, actually.
It does seem really simple, and on paper it is really simple, but there are some of the variables that my board members who are female brought up is, situations like this, what if it's a category of where all men get nominated, and what if it's a category of all white men that get nominated, and what if
But why would that? I'm sorry. I think you're probably stating something really obvious that is feeling like math to me. In what world would there be a year that every best featured? Do you mean in terms of winners? You don't mean in terms of nominations?
I mean in terms of nominations too, because people have done studies on this where if you have a gender non-specific category, men are the ones who always get nominated.
Right. So an acute awareness to that not happening will be
So
important for your people.
yeah, and that's one of the things that we're talking about that we have to be really stringent about, is making sure that even though we took out, gender specifications, it's not all one gender, and not everybody is white, not every, and that it truly does represent the full breadth of the theater scene,
Right.
and not just, not
It's sort of why people don't, I mean, obviously, in some ways, these awards are the bread and butter of the organizations that
right.
sponsor them. But it does bring, I have a Tony podcast. It's called And the Award Goes To, and it's been really interesting. That too was kind of born out of there were no Tonys happening. So how do we keep the party going?
Right.
And feed Tony content to people. I say this all the time. We live in New York. We have the great fortune of seeing stuff. These award shows, the televised ones or the ones you can watch on your computer, are really meaningful for people who can't get to the theater and live all over the world. That's their only chance of seeing a snippet of this show, although more and more bootlegs, and there are ways in which people are seeing entire shows on their YouTubes. So it does beg the question, why awards, right? As opposed to just celebrate. And so what do you think about that? I mean, I've had guests who are sort of in retrospect going, it was a really incredible night. I'm not sure how I feel about it in retrospect.
And it is really hard, because how can you say, one person's performance is better than one person's excellent performance is better than another person's excellent performance? And especially now, it's funny, one of my members coming at this from a negative connotation was like, how would you be able to lump together Nora from A Doll's House and King Lear? And, that's a perfectly fair thought, because, one lead role is not the equivalent of another lead role, but is, from that perspective of, is there a difference between male and female and non-binary acting? No, there's not. Acting is acting.
Well, it's a pretty subjective. I mean, all of it is completely
subjective. All of it
I would argue that actually those are incredibly good comparisons. I think Nora and King Lear actually
Right.
for my money would be
right.
really great examples of like, yeah, they're both unbelievable roles and unbelievable
For
plays.
for unbelievable performers.
Yeah, I'd actually say that's a great example of, if
And
we
you
are
turn
going down this route.
and you just turned it around on the person that said it to me in a negative connotation. So that's
Yeah, I was like,
perfect.
no, it's exactly, yeah, I'd
Yeah.
like to see that. I'd
Yeah.
like to see that in some kind of lip sync battle.
Yeah. Rose from Gypsy opposite Tevye from Fiddler on the
Yes,
like,
it would
right.
be. Yes, it's a tie as far
Right.
as I'm concerned.
As for the validity of awards, that's a question that's sort of above my pay grade in terms of, we do it, and it's funny, I always talk about, my organization tends to be older. It's a lot of older people. It's people in their 80s who, and this is not a dig at any of them, but I'm shocked that so many of them have returned on our membership because it's much harder to get around now, I've noticed, for people. And a lot of people have safety issues in Manhattan with crime and
COVID, I mean, in
COVID
real
and COVID. Yeah,
physical
period.
health issues,
COVID,
right?
period.
You're more vulnerable.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I'm surprised as many of my people have come back as they have, but they all love going to the theater and they're all writing for their blogs and stuff.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And so, I often said to my wife during the pandemic, like everybody, like, should we even do this again? Like, is there even a point of like continuing this organization? And my wife is always like, you don't actually realize how important this organization is to the community itself in terms of marketing, in terms of, advertisements. And I realize that more and more when I see all of these signs, it's like winner 12 Tony Awards, winner 15 Drama Desk Awards, winner 5 Outer Critics Circle Awards or whatever. And I never realized until recently how much of a factor in marketing all of this stuff is. And
Right.
because half of the success of a show is just marketing these days. And everything needs to get butts and seats. And if, my Outer Critics or our Outer Critics Circle Awards, if that is a thing that's going to get 3 more people in seats and sell 3 more tickets, and that makes the difference between a show closing on a Sunday and a show staying open for another week,
You'll take it.
That's the importance to me.
Yeah. Can I ask you, since I have you here?
Sure. Ask
So
me whatever you want.
really? Okay. What's your favorite show? No, talk about TheaterMania, because I sort of, TheaterMania is a word that has been in my life for as long as, I've been an actress in this community. And today I was like, I'm going to deep dive on the TheaterMania website because I kind of want to really understand. My friend David is the managing director of this entity.
Yeah.
And so a managing editor, I'm sorry. Although you wear so many hats there, I'm sure.
I do. And
director is a good.
I literally work my way up from freelance photographer to now I more or less run the place.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
Talk about what it is when you talk about something as like an entity and where its power in the community sort of lies. Can you talk a little bit about this home that you've had as an employee?
My entire professional career
Yeah.
is in my home.
Yeah.
And I came into it 13 years ago now this summer as a freelance photographer. And I was really lucky and fortunate that it really has been my bread and butter for so long in an industry that is so volatile. It was created in 1999 as a project of like a listings project. We're going to throw up as many shows as we can on the site for people to discover and attend and see theater. And it just sort of ballooned into that. It's a news site. We do reviews, we do features, we do a lot of interviews. These days, I look at our reviews as our bread and butter because we have developed a voice that people recognize and are news. We are trusted sources, I like to think. But it's really, for a long time, there had been the thought that, we're an industry website. We're a website like Playbill. We're a website like Broadway.com. And we sell tickets. We mostly do discounts. And I sort of, after the pandemic, tried to veer us away from the industry stuff because, there are so many websites that do industry stuff. I used to go to every Broadway opening night and take pictures and interviews and all of that. And I'm sure that's where we probably met years and years ago too. Uh, and what in the age of Instagram, in the age of post-pandemic, I'm like, what is the value of a website like this? And for me, it's to get butts and seats to some degree. It's how do we convince people that are still afraid to buy tickets? And so now, instead of doing we're going to cover every opening night, which we're not going to really do anymore, we're going to do do you hear my baby crying in the background? It's lunchtime.
That's really the content I'm here
Yeah,
for. Let's be honest.
same.
All right. Well, we don't want her to go hungry. Let's.
It's fine. My in-laws
Oh, perfect.
yeah, no, and it's, so now my goal is, how do we act as a concierge for people to really convince them to come see a show.
Mhm.
And so that's what we do. The company used to be owned by a couple of people. Now it's owned by a company called Audience View, which is a Canadian ticketing company.
Is it a subscription? Like, does one? Because I was looking like, oh, I didn't know you sell tickets, and so I was looking, and then you have to join or you subscribe. Is there a membership aspect to TheaterMania?
You can sign up for our emails on the website very easily. You'll get our daily newsletter with all of the finest news, reviews, features you could think of for Broadway. We also have TheaterMania Gold, which is a seat filling service. And per the rules of that, I'm not allowed to talk about that, but it's, 90
for early days in a performance where you need audiences and they may not be there yet.
And you could pay a yearly fee or a monthly fee. I think the yearly fee is still $99, like in the 100 range.
And you get to be a seat filler.
You get to be a seat filler, and it's, I think, $5 a ticket or so. And it's more than theater. It's comedy, it's music. Occasionally we get Yankee games on there.
That's amazing. People should know about that.
I know.
They do now. We just told them.
Right. So that's what we do here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Last question.
Yes.
And maybe this will connect to your little known fact. You have been, I definitely was interviewed by you, when I do a show on the red carpet on opening nights, but you have immersed your life in theater professionally for a very long time now.
Very long time.
What is it? What was your, gateway to theater?
I grew up in New York, and I was very fortunate to have parents that didn't care about sports and wanted me to immerse me in the arts. I went to theater at a really young age. My first show was Beauty and the Beast with Kerry Butler and Terrence Mann, and I've told them both about that.
Yeah.
And then my second show was You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, with you and your cohorts.
Yeah.
And then my parents and grandparents got tired of all the kiddie stuff and started taking me to Bring Into Noise, Bring Into Funk, and had a Gabbler with Kate Burton and Michael Emerson when I was young for it. And Edward Albee's The Goat when I was way too young for it. But, the producers was my bar mitzvah present with the original cast. I saw it and I was just sort of like, I don't want to be an actor, but I want to do stuff in theater. And I've just I went into writing because it was a way for me to get my feelings about it. Because, there are not many, precocious tweens and teenagers who go to the theater regularly, especially in, inner city, New York City, where, I grew up in Queens, and it was the furthest thing from a lot of people's minds.
Yeah.
I started writing just for myself as a way to talk to no one about the stuff that I had seen and the things that I liked. And I have been very fortunate enough to parlay it into a career.
Yeah.
That I still deeply enjoy, despite a lot of my protestations in person.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of amazing. I know, to have an avocation that's also a occupation.
My mom says that all the time too.
About you or about her life?
About me. That I've managed to turn, my hobby into my job.
Well, anyone who figures out how to do that is someone, whose masterclass I want to attend.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there a little known fact you can share before I let you go?
Ooh, a little known about anything or about.
Mhm.
Mm.
Anything on the planet.
Well, you know, my wife and I met on a red carpet. Do you know that story?
I do not.
No. So she and I uh met, yeah, we met on a red carpet. Prior to, she works in television now, but prior to that she was a celebrity publicist. And one of her clients was the Lucille Lortel Awards, which is, you know, awards for off-Broadway theater. And I was taking photos at the event, and she was uh there as the publicist for the event. And you know, we spent a long night in the Skirball Center press room, which was a classroom downstairs in the basement, eating cold pizza and talking about how neither of us wanted to be there because it was a Sunday night. Uh, 3 years later, we started dating because she was seeing people and I was not
Waiting for her to stop seeing people.
right. And I'm not very good with social cues in general. So what do I know?
Right.
Yeah, that was, we met, yeah, and then we started dating. It was the year of Groundhog Day and the Dear Evan Hansen Tony matchup, and she was Andy Krall's publicist.
I was
And
there the night Andy Carl had an accident
I
on
was
stage.
too. I was too.
What?
That was the night, that was what cemented Felicia and my relationship, because I was there
Because
that,
they took the curtain down for a
yeah, yeah,
while and
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. And
and
it was right towards the end of the show. It looked
yes,
like,
it was
you know,
crazy.
it was crazy. And she was not there, but uh we hadn't talked in a while. And she had texted me during the intermission of that show to ask me a question. I was like, oh, I'm seeing Andy in Groundhog Day. And she's like, oh, let me know what you think. And you know, the curtain comes down. I'm like, hey, I think your boy just, like, something bad happened to him.
Really hurt himself.
And
Yeah.
she was like at a party with friends, and she was kind of drunk, and she's like, what the fuck are you talking? Excuse me, what the hell are you talking about? And so I texted it. So I was like, yeah, you probably should get on this.
Yeah, you
And
should probably meet him at the ER in
right.
about 5 minutes.
And literally we haven't stopped talking ever since.
Well, I can't believe I got to be there. I
Yeah.
can't believe while you're texting your future wife, I'm texting my husband at home going, this
To be
is
like, this is crazy.
well, then he finishes the show. The whole thing
Miraculously.
was crazy.
And it's funny, I was messaging Orfe at the same time because she saw it on Twitter, and she was like, can anyone give me info? And I just
Yeah,
messaged her, and I was like, this is what's happened. She's like, she was freaking that whole night was just so strange.
it was freaky. I mean, talk about, I sometimes ask the question, the show must go on, question mark?
Should it?
Like,
Right.
but his adrenaline, I mean, he did it.
It was, and you know, it was a critics night. I was reviewing the show, and you know, I guess the force of theater, like, he was like, I know I have to finish the show even though I'm
Yeah.
not going to be able to move, which is,
Even though we just and you could see it, like
you
you
could
saw
absolutely,
the jet, like you saw
see
it and you
it.
were like, it's like watching a figure skater. You were like, oh,
Yeah,
oh.
you could
um
absolutely, yeah.
oh my God, I haven't thought about that in a
And,
long
I
time.
know. And it's funny whenever I see him, and I think to myself, thank you for creating my
Isn't
family.
that incredible? I just said that to Katie
Inadvertently.
Finneran because my husband and I, one of our first dates together was seeing Noises Off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I mean, hilarious production. And we were there because Tom McCarthy was a friend of ours
Right,
who's now become the Oscar winning director, Tom McCarthy. But
right.
everything she did, like we were literally sort of grabbing each other because we didn't know how else to stop laughing. And
That's how
we
I
were,
feel about Katie Finneran, just like walking down the street. It's
oh
just
my God,
it's hysterical.
I
Yeah.
know, she's so hysterical. And I was just saying to her, and she's like, how did you never tell me that? I was like, I'm sure I have, you've just
Right.
I think you've forgotten, but it is really amazing how people are little angels and cupids without even knowing it.
Without even, yeah.
All right, well, it's lunchtime at the
It
Gordon
is, yeah.
household. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really proud of your organization, and thank you for
I am
leading the
too.
way.
It's I I always worry about this sort of thing because I come off flippant to some degree about the importance of my organization or whatever. Um, but no, this is a really important thing, and I'm really proud of us for taking the step that we are taking, because it is necessary, and it's necessary to show that we're allies to the industry and we are cognizant of the world around us, and we're not just sort of blind to struggles that people are actually having to figure out who they are in general. Uh
And even beyond that,
and even
celebrating it, right?
yeah,
Just celebrating it in such a
yeah,
beautiful way.
because
When are the 2023 Outer
ooh,
Critics
so
Circle going to be,
so
these awards?
our nomination, let me pull up my phone
Please
calendar and
do. Please
see.
do.
So it's always the Thursday before Memorial Day. So
Okay.
it'll be the 25th. They'll be presented.
And
We
where are
will
they happening this
at
year?
the Bruno Walter Auditorium at the Performing Arts Library at Lincoln Center. The
Beautiful
good thing
space.
about our organization is that we announce our winners in advance. So it's not the sort of thing where people are sitting like, oh my God, did I win?
Nauseous.
Right.
Exactly.
So winners will be announced on the 15th of May or 16th of May, and nominations will be announced on April 25th, working my way backwards.
I just found out, I don't know if you know this, Alice and Janney told me that actually there are incentives to keep your Oscar acceptance speeches short. Like there's literally prizes awarded
Really?
to, which I was like, mostly the people winning Oscars, like they need a weekend at a spa. Like they've
Right,
already,
right, right.
like
I'll take
what?
that. I'll take
What
a
did it
weekend at a spa.
exactly? So I'm not sure really what the gift bag includes if you keep it down to the timing that
Well,
is suggested.
we don't have any of those incentives, but we do have to clear the space at 6 o'clock. So
Right. So you might want to offer a,
right,
I don't know, a weekend at a spa to keep
right.
it all within the timing.
My joke is that I always know how long the ceremony is going to run, depending on how many British shows are nominated, because the British nominees or winners are never going to fly out for it.
So it's perfect. So
Right,
there may be a lot of that this year.
right.
David, thank you. I can't wait to see you
Thank
again
you.
in person. This
I
was so much
know.
fun.
When we last saw each other at Mike Birbiglia's show, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love that show so much.
I did too.
All right, sweetheart. Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you.
You too. Stay on with me after you stop recording.
Okay.